happy to see some familiar faces here. Hello, Yana. I see a bunch of more people. Hello, Danny. And everybody else who's joining us tonight. My name is Mordechai Zeller. I live in Ma'ale Gilboa, which is a kibbutz up in the northern part of Israel. And today we're going to be speaking about dreams. We are starting this online course through applied Jewish spirituality. And I'm really excited and happy to be able to be doing this with you. So I hope you all got the email where I sent a page that we'll be studying some text together. But I just want to give maybe a little bit of background before we start and before we jump in. I love dreams. I love dreaming. I love hearing dreams. My whole life I've always, I guess, had the privilege of, when I was a child and I'd wake up from a dream that I had, my father never said it was just a dream, go back to sleep. But he said to me, what a wonderful dream. How many heads did the monster have? And my dreams were always listened to. This is part of my family tradition. My father grew up in a Jungian home in Los Angeles, and my grandfather was one of the students of Carl Jung, who started the Los Angeles Center. And after leaving Berlin, but part of their tradition and the tradition that I grew up with really had to do with dreams being very sacred and a very important part of everyday life. And here we are when I spoke to Daniel and we spoke about different ideas of things that we can study together. And I said, how about learning about dreams? And when I offered to learn about dreams, the idea was not just to give a class where we touch on some of the text, which is what we are also going to do. We're going to be learning some texts and trying to see how dream material appeared in many of the, I would say, primal Jewish sources. But hopefully at the end also, we're going to speak a little bit about how we can start listening to our dreams. Now, we have a pretty big group tonight, so I don't know if I'm going to get to hear all of you. But whoever's coming, I don't know what your reasons are for joining this course. If you have dreams that, has dreaming been an important part of your life? Are you wanting to dream more? Are dreams something that have always drawn you? There are people who live in this world, but a different reality is always one that calls us, that we're connected to. And then our ability to move between waking life and dream life is a really powerful and important one. Wilfred Bion, who's a British psychoanalyst, he said, we dream all the time. We dream during the day, we dream during the night. The only difference is that at night we're aware of our dreams, but we're dreaming all the time. It's the same way that the stars don't disappear at night. We get to see them, but during the day, the stars are still there. So our ability to dream is almost like a different mode of consciousness, which is constantly around us. And we're going to speak about dreaming, and we're going to, I think we're going to start with our source sheet and see where this takes us. And when I thought where the place to start in our tradition when we speak about dreams, I thought the best place to start with is actually maybe Jacob himself, who let his dreams lead him on his journey. Meaning, yes, there was one or two dreams before Avimelech, who's one of the kings of Gerar. He has some dreams, so it's not the earliest dream in the Bible. But something about Jacob and his tradition of dreaming starts him and allows him on his journey to be connected to a different kind of reality. And something about that is really powerful. And I'll just say that sometimes we're very, when we look at dreams in the Bible, we are very busy saying, what did the dream mean? And what they did with the dream. And we don't stop enough time to be able to dwell on what is I would say, the significance on a psychoanalytic level of understanding. And I'll also say that for many years, people, when they had a dream that shook them, they would go and seek out advice. They would go to the oracles, or they'd go to their rabbi or to their priest. And nowadays, When people have dreams, they go to their psychoanalyst. But we do have a living tradition of what it is to listen to dreams and to give them meaning. And I'm hoping that during our learning today and in the next couple of sessions, that also all of you in the dream circle that we do will be able to share dreams, to do some dream work, and to be able to start, those of you who don't write down your dreams, to be able to connect a little bit to that as well. Okay, so let's start with our source sheet, and I'm going to bring it up here as a 1 second. Okay, so I sent this before, so you should have all gotten the page. And let's begin. Let's begin our journey with Jacob. Jacob is running away from home. He is running away from a brother who wants to kill him. He took away a blessing that he felt wasn't his. It might have been his. He followed what his mother told him to do, and he's running away. And he doesn't know where he's going to. He doesn't know where he's coming. He has no home to come back to, and he's a little bit lost in the world. And as he's going, just as he's crossing over a place that seems familiar to him, but he's not exactly sure what this place is, he finds himself that it's nighttime. And this is what the verses say, and I'll read it in Hebrew, and then there's a translation here in English. Vayifga b'makom, vayalen sham kiva hashemesh. Now, vayifga b'makom in Hebrew means he literally hit the place, meaning he was getting there, he was walking on his journey, but something about this specific place struck him. Maybe that's a good translation here. And then it says, Vayalin Sham, he goes to sleep because the sun went down. Vayikach me'avnei makom, he took rocks, vayasem merashotav, and he put them under his head, and he lay down in that place. Vayachalom, and he has a dream. Ve'ine sulam mutzav arza, ve'rosho megia hashamayma, and he sees a ladder. And this ladder is connecting heaven and earth. The malachei Elohim olim v'yordim bo, and angels are going up and coming down. Now this dream is a mind-blowing dream. Yaakov wakes up from this dream. Sometimes an important thing, by the way, about dream work isn't just the dream material itself, but what was the state that you went to sleep in, and what's the state that you wake up in? And here Yaakov wakes up, and it says, Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato, and he woke up from his sleep. Vayomer achen yesh Elohim b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. There's God in this place, and I did not know. So he has this, really, I think, one of the most beautiful verses in the Bible, where Jacob wakes up from his dream and says, there's God in this place, but when I went to sleep, I didn't know. Meaning something about his dream enabled him to tune in, to open up to a different reality. I would say kind of existing all the time where he's at, but that he was a bit disconnected from. And his dream allowed him to remember something that was important enough for him that he woke up, that he's connected to God, and that he's continuing on his journey. And I think this dream is so important because we see so many artists painting it. We see it appearing in so many images. This image of Jacob having this dream is a powerful one. And I'll say, even though in the next couple of sessions we'll get deeper into this, he passes on this gift of dreaming to Joseph, to his son. There's something about this that doesn't just lead him, but becomes part of his family tradition, which leads me to the next text that I want to share. The next text I'd like to share, okay, is from a Kabbalistic book called Hatzioni, which was written in the 14th century by a Kabbalist who was born in Germany. Some say that he came to Israel and studied on Mount Zion, and that's why he called his book the Tzioni. But we're talking 14th century mysticism. And there's a certain verse right before Jacob runs away. I'm sure you all know the story, but just to tell it anyways, is that Isaac is blind and he wants to give a blessing. And he says to his son Esav, he says, go hunt and bring me food that I love. And once you feed me, I'll give you a blessing. So this is what this rabbi, Rav Menachem Atzioni, from the 14th century says. Vaseli matamim. Why is it that Isaac asks his son to bring him food in order to give him a blessing? So he brings a beautiful answer. He says, our sages taught that prophecy dwells only through a state of joy. The only way to achieve prophecy and knowledge of God is through joy. V'soda matamim, and the secret of this delicious food that he asked for, husoda merkava, is the secret of the chariot. And the chariot, he's alluding to the chariots of Ezekiel. Ma'aseh merkava, it's the greatest secrets of what makes up this world, of seeing beyond, of what Ezekiel saw as the heaven opened up. So this is what he says. And here, if this is where he kind of hits the point in saying, why was he asking for food? He says, Ma shehesig Avraham al yidei anashim, hesig Yitzchak al yidei mat'amim. What Abraham achieved through his connection with people, Isaac achieved through his connection to food. And Jacob through his ladder, and David through his harp. This is what he says. There are a lot of pathways to connect to God and to achieve prophecy. Everybody has their own way. Abraham is a people person. Just take him to a party. You know, his tent, he had 5 openings to his tent. Wherever he sat, there were always people coming in. So people coming in, you know, he's 3 days after his circumcision and there's angels coming in and he runs to accept them and to, you know that there's a kind of people who just put them with other people and they're blossoming, they're flourishing. That's Avraham. He needs people in order to achieve God. And he meets people and he recognizes the godly aspect in them. Every person is an angel when they walk into Abraham's tent. Isaac, he's more of an introvert, but he loves food. Now, I don't mean this in a hedonistic, in a low way. You know, sometimes we taste something which is so good and we say, it's celestial, it's godly. Isaac knows that his way to God is through eating. So he says, if I'm about to give you a blessing, and this blessing is going to be an important blessing, I need to taste something good, because through my senses, something will open up that I'll be able to channel this blessing. And how did David do it? King David was a musician. When he felt a bit lost, he took out his harp, playing music. We all know that experience of dancing, of singing. Something happens to us when we hear music. But what about Jacob? What does he mean that Jacob achieved this through his ladder? Was it through this moment? Was it through this experience that he had? Something with the experience of the ladder. And ladder, by the way, sulam, it's the one place it appears in the Bible is right here, this word, which means ladder, which means a connection. But there's something that Yaakov does, which is special and different than his father, grandfather, and then David in his spiritual path. I'm putting this aside and we're going to go back to this because I do want to speak about his ability to dream. Because in my opinion, what Rabbi Menachem Atzioni is teaching us is that what other people achieved, their spiritual practice through whatever it is they did, Jacob was a dreamer. This was his path. This was his path. Okay. The next piece I want to bring is from the Zohar. The Zohar, we could do a whole course just about the Zohar. The Zohar, the book of splendor, the book of illuminance, the book of Jewish mystical thought, which was discovered in Spain in the 13th century, but has within it traces, traditionally, of teachings that go all the way back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great mystic. It's a wonderful book. We can do a whole course just on tastes from the Zohar. But the Zohar, when he takes the story of Jacob, here's what he says. And this is from the Zohar Hadash, which was, some say, the oldest parts of the Zohar that were revealed a bit later on. Vayifga b'makom. So what Rabbi Yitzchak said, be'ezeh makom paga, why does it say that he came upon, but that he hit this place, that there's something that was almost like impact, something impacted him? So he says, Where did he come to? He came to the place where the temple will one day be built upon. So he comes to the place that years later, the temple will be built. This is before the temple will be built. And when he takes all the rocks and sleeps on them, there's a tradition that says that that is the foundation stone, that years later the temple will be born. This is a center point, okay? And although he wanted to keep walking, he couldn't. He reached a place that he couldn't move on. It was so powerful. And Rabbi Yossi says, right, Rabbi Yehuda said that it's not like it got dark, but he just couldn't move on. And Rabbi Yossi said he felt a need to pray. Something happened that his heart opened up in this place. But he didn't just pray. Vaifga also means there's something almost violent about it. There's something harsh. And the Zohar says he got really upset. He started being angry. And the Zohar says the word vayalen sham, vayalen, which means he slept, also comes from the verse vayalonu ha'am al Moshe, which means that the people complained to Moses. Why? Because the sun was gone. He's in the dark. He doesn't know where he's going. He's off to find his soulmate, but he doesn't know who she's going to be. He had to leave his family. He's in no man's land, and he's all alone for the first time in his life. He's scared. So the Zohar says it's not that the sun literally came down, it's that he was going through a really hard time. And during this hard time, a dream appeared. Freud might say that a dream is a wish fulfillment. It's almost like, I wish things were better, so I have a dream that things will be okay. But Jung would say, and we're going to go deeper into this today, and maybe next week as well, Jung says a dream is telling us something that we don't know, something that we've forgotten. And the dream is here to remind Jacob, to remind him how important it is and how within him he has this connection, something that connects heaven and earth. And this is an important thing for Jacob to remember, because there's moments that he's forgetting that completely. So here he is on his own, lost, not knowing where he's going. And he continues on his journey. But there is something about this that is showing us that the place that he stopped at is an important one. Now, is it important where we dream? Usually, wherever I go, I can dream. I can dream in my bed. I can dream in somebody else's bed. I can dream when I fall asleep on the bus. But here it sounds like there's a specific place that he walked by a place, but that place was powerful enough that it stopped him and that he dreamt there, that he stopped there. So what was it about that place? There's an anthropologist by the name of Mircea Eliade, and Mircea Eliade, he wrote a lot about different religious traditions, and he writes about looking and finding similar things in many traditions. And when he speaks about this specific story, he says this wasn't just any place. We're not going to read the whole piece now because I think we're already. I see that we don't have as much time as I would like. But when he speaks about this point where Jacob goes to sleep, this point where he's sleeping, he calls it an Axismundi. Axismundi, this is like the center of the world, and it's a sacred place that the world and sacred space is built around it. And he says every religion system has one. It's a sacred mountain, it's a sacred tree, but something that the whole world is connected around it, and it connects heaven and earth. And when he speaks about this Axismundi, he says it connects heaven, it connects the underworld, and there's a communication that takes place there of the upper worlds and the underworlds. And the examples he brings, he says, of this Axismundi, this pillar of the world, is Jacob's ladder, sacred mountains like Mount Meru, Mount Gerizim, also Mount Tavor, which literally means the belly button of the world. Sometimes I think that when God created the world, he made it round so that every point on the world can be the center point of the world. But we have these traditions that say where we're standing, it's the middle. You are at the middle. You're at a point where right now you're at the center of the world. And that creates sacred space. And when Jacob stops and has his dream there, that's where he is. In ancient Greek temples, if I could just ask, I don't know who isn't on mute, but let's just hang on. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Okay. So in ancient Greek temples, there were specific temples that people would go to, and the purpose of going there would be to be healed. And when they would get healed, the process would be, interestingly, that you would come and give a certain sacrifice, and after that, you would go to sleep in the animal skin of the animal that you gave as a sacrifice, but you would go to sleep with some sort of question or some sort of something that's troubling you, and you would hope that a dream would come to you. Okay, and these ancient traditions spoke about dreaming in a specific place. So the cult of Asclepius was the most highly organized, widespread incubation cult. So part of their spiritual practice was going to sleep. And by the 2nd century, there were 300 active temples throughout Greece and Rome devoted to curing by intervention of the archetypal healer who appeared in dreams to pilgrims at his shrine. So people would go to sleep, hoping that somebody would appear and heal them in their dreams. And according to some of these traditions, also, there were snakes, not poisonous snakes, that would kind of they would slither over the ground of the temple, and you would go to sleep, and these things would kind of crawl over you. But very often people would have dreams. And there were 2 ways that this could happen. Either you had a dream that was meaningful enough, and that dream itself would heal you. You'd wake up and say, I know what I need to do. Or you wouldn't understand. It was a dream that needed to be understood, and then you would go sit with the priest, and the priest would help you understand what it is you need to do. Okay, but again, we have these 2 kinds of dreams. There's a dream in itself, which tells me what I need to do, and there's dreams that are hidden, that are clothed, that have like a message, but which is hidden, and I need help in order to understand what it is I need to do. And this reminds us a little bit of 2 kinds of dreams that we see in the Bible as well. Very often we have a prophecy dream where God comes and says in the dream, here's what you need to do. And people wake up from the dream. The dream itself tells me what I need to do. But very often the dream is a mystery, as we see in the story of Paro, or even in the story of Joseph. And sometimes we see a certain image, and that image is something that needs to be understood, needs to be taken not just as face value, but understand the symbolic meaning there. Okay, so sometimes we need to be able to interpret. I'll also say that today in psychoanalysis, there's 2 schools of thought that we'll go deeper into. But according to Freud and Jung, the important thing in dreams is to understand what the dream says. But I would say that Bion, and following in his footsteps, Ogden and Antonino Ferro, I don't know if these names mean anything to anybody here, if there's any therapists who are also here studying with us today, who say, based on the teachings of Wilfred Bion, that the important thing isn't what we dream, but the ability to dream. And the dream itself has something which is healing, regardless of what we make of it or how we understand it. The dream itself means that we're touching on a certain reality, which is transformative. Okay, so I want us to continue just a little bit with these dreams of ladders and see how they continue to appear again and again. One of the really interesting things takes us again to the Heihalot. And the Heihalot, and I know we're running here, and for some of you who don't know, the Heihalot are some of the earliest Kabbalistic literature. And we're talking about, nobody knows exactly when they were written, but some people say that they were, that we're talking sometime around the time of the Talmud. We're talking like 4th to 6th century. And in some of the traditions of the Heihalot, it's a lot about angels and a lot about mystical journeys. And there's a story that Rabbi Ishmael says that the hero of the Heihalot, Nechunya ben Hakana, who's one of the rabbis, he gathered, we're talking after the destruction of the temple, but he gathered a lot of people, a lot of students, in the courtyard of the temple. We're talking about the destroyed temple. This is after the temple was destroyed. And he sat there with them and he gave over a certain secret to them. He taught them how to dissociate from their bodies. He taught them how to have access to what he called a ladder. So we can see here again the use of this idea of a ladder in spirituality. And here it's not specifically a dream, but when he says it, when he gave this over, he said to his students, what I'm teaching you now, you know what this is like? It's like a man who has a ladder in his house. Meaning before Jacob, he had his ladder because he was walking next to the temple. That's why he had this dream of the ladder. But here at the Heihalot, after the temple was destroyed, Nechunya ben Akana, the great mystic of the Heihalot, was trying to say, if you listen to my teachings, you will be able to take this ability to have a ladder, but have a ladder in your own home. What does it mean to have a ladder in your own home? What does it mean to be able to have transformative dreams, not just in a sacred place, but to make your home into a sacred space where you're able to connect to the upper worlds, to the lower worlds, and to have these journeys every night. And Yosef Dan says this is one of the earliest, if not the first, mystical reference to the mystical experience as an ascent by a spiritual ladder. This unique assembly, which combined the meeting of all great mystics, is the first such event in the history of the Hebrew mystical literature, but not the last. Medieval and early modern Jewish mystics used this format for expressing such experiences. And we have the Zoharic Idras and mystics in Sfat, an early Hasidic movement, who all use this image as a way to experience and to express what they do in their spiritual work. And I hope in the time that we still have that we'll be able to see and taste some of these. And I know this is almost like a really quick taste because, you know, here we did a story from the Bible. We got a taste of the Zohar and something from the Heihalot. Heihalot literally means the chambers. And it's these chambers, the idea that there's a chamber within a chamber within a chamber. And I go from room to room and there's angels there. And if you know the names of the angels, you're able to go through. But it's these deep meditative practices of the mystics in the Heihalot that date all the way back to the early Roman time period, in these 400 to 600 years of a collection of this intense meditative literature. Okay. I want to take a chance to break out of only Jewish sources here, because this idea of a ladder, and I'll even dare say the idea of a ladder that happens in the spot of the temple in Jerusalem, is a story that appears also in a different tradition as well. And I want to bring two sources that share a story from the Hadithim of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, the Prophet Muhammad had a deep connection to Judaism. A lot of his teachers early on, when he was figuring things out of his religion, he had Jewish teachers as well, and met a lot of mystics. And a lot of the early Islamic literature has deep connections to Judaism as well. And we have a lot of these connections here. But I just want to offer this and see where this takes us. So here's the story according to Avicenna, who wrote the Hadithim, the Midrash, based on the Quran. And the Quran has a story of Muhammad going on his night journey that takes him all the way to Jerusalem. The third holiest site, according to Islam, is the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this is the story as it appears. So Avicenna says, I lay asleep in my house. It was a night which there were thunder and lightning. No living being could be heard. No one was awake, whereas I was not asleep. I dwelt between waking and sleeping. And then he goes on a journey. According to the tradition, Il Burak, who's his flying horse, comes and takes him. And as he takes him on this flying night journey, he knocks over, this is one of the sources, he knocks over a jug of water. And they go flying, soaring in the sky. And in an instant, they arrive in Jerusalem at the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, and at the Dome of the Rock. So this is Avicenna. And I'll also say that, remember that jug of water, we'll get back to it in a minute, okay? Because he's kind of between, he's not asleep, he's not awake, but something takes place. And according to some versions, Muhammad merely rode al-Buwak to Jerusalem, where dismounting upon Mount Moriah, which is the same place the temple was built, the same place that Jacob had his ladder dream, he caught hold of the lower rung of a golden ladder lowered from heaven and accompanied by Gabriel, ascended through the 7 spheres separating the earth from the inner surface of the Empyrean. At the gate of each sphere stood one of the patriarchs, who Muhammad saluted as he entered the various planes. At the gate of the first heaven stood Adam, and then John, and then Jesus, Joseph, Hanoch, Enoch, Aaron, Moses, and at the 7th, Abraham. And he goes and he meets all of these spiritual leaders, and he goes up to meet God. There's a great teaching that says that he kept on going to God, and Moses says, go, you have to haggle with God. This is the Middle Eastern idea that we haggle, right? So he comes back, says, so how many times do you have to pray? He goes, 10. He goes, no, go back. You have to, I got him down to 3, says Moses, right? And Muhammad goes again, and he brings him down another time. Finally, he comes down, and Moses says, you have to go again. He goes, I'm too embarrassed. I stayed at 5. And this is why Muslims pray 5 times a day and Jews pray 3 times a day. I don't know what it means about our ability to haggle, but haggling with God is definitely a big part of our tradition, right? Some people say the word Yisrael literally means he who wrestles with God. Okay, but we have this tradition in the same spot of the temple of Muhammad, the prophet, coming to the same spot where Jacob had his ladder and having a ladder that connected heaven and earth. And according to a Sufi friend of mine, this was at a period of Muhammad's life that he was also very lost. He was almost at a breaking point. If to continue this journey, starting a new religion isn't an easy thing, and he felt very lost and didn't know what to do. And here he has again this dream reminding him, not just all the patriarchs there, but heaven and earth connecting, meeting God himself, this ladder. We're going to skip number 11. Number 11 is just from the Babylonian Talmud. We'll do more about this next week. The Babylonian Talmud is filled with understandings of what it means when you climb up to a roof, when you go down, when you go up steps. What does it mean? But pretty much the Talmud says when you go up in a dream, it means that you're going up to greatness. And some people say if you go up or if you come down, it's movement. It's movement in the psyche, and it's always a good sign. The beginning, they said going up is good, coming down is bad. But then Abaye and Rava said, going up, once you come up, even if you go down, it's movement. Movement is good. Next piece I want to bring, and I know we're leaping through different time periods here, is from the 16th century in Sfat. Sfat, the mystical city up in the Galilee. This was the center of Jewish mysticism. After the Jews were expelled from Spain, they came to Tzfat. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the mystical poetry, Lecha Dodi, was written there. There was Tzfat in the 16th century was the place to be, and it was an amazing place. And one of the greatest rabbis there that we heard of is Yitzchak Luria, the Ari. And the Ari had one student who was his greatest student, and his greatest student, his name was Reb Chaim Vital. This is a translation of Reb Chaim Vital's diaries, because he wrote a mystical diary. And his mystical diary, what he wrote down was actually his dreams. And he didn't mean for it to be published as a book, but his grandson, he found it lying around and he published it. So we have this diary where he's writing down his dreams. And I'll say something which is also at the end, he has a special chapter. He doesn't just write down his dreams. He writes down the dreams that other people dreamt about him. When you're a mystic, it's not just your dreams. It's any dream that other people dream about you. Keep it in your dream journal. It has significance to you. That's what Reb Chaim Vital teaches. So this is a dream that he had. The year is 1566. It is the 8th of Tevet, which is actually, I think, right about the date we're at now. Maybe even to the day. I think, wait, Tuesday is the 10th of Tevet. Yes, today is actually the 8th of Tevet. So this diary was written to this day in 1566. So he's writing down not just what he dreamt, but what happened before he dreamt. He said, I recited the Kiddush, and I sat down at the table to eat. I was shedding copious tears and was depressed and melancholy because the previous 10th of Cheshvan, I married my wife. You'd think he'd be happy that he married his wife. He wasn't sure if he should marry her. He writes in his diary, should I, shouldn't I? He has some dreams about it. We'll do more of them in one of our next sessions. But the above mentioned Chana, and I had been bound with witchcraft. What does this mean, by the way, that he was bound by witchcraft? Probably that he was suffering from erectile dysfunction. And to him, this meant that he was bound with witchcraft because he wasn't able to consummate the marriage. And he was heartbroken about this. I said to God, blessed be he, how is it possible for such a tragedy to befall me? In particular, since it relates to the sin of nocturnal emissions. Nocturnal emissions, we're talking about having a wet dream. And all this, according to mystics, is invoking all kinds of, even though it was something that wasn't chosen because it happened, but when you're a mystic, to you, these dreams had something to do with demons and with, having a pure sexual ideal, which didn't always fit reality in that sense. But so he's really upset about this. And my anguish was so great that I didn't eat anything. I lay on my bed crying face down until I dozed off. And from the many tears, I had a wondrous dream. First of all, what a beautiful way. He's writing this to himself. This is such an inside view. We don't always get to see what the mystics are sharing about their personal life. And here, Chaim Vital is just showing us such an important part of his life at that time. And this is his dream. And I got to tell you, the dream is really long, and I brought just a short part of it. I looked up and saw a ladder, the bottom of which was standing on top of a mountain, and its top reached the heavens. The ladder only had 3 rungs, and the distance between each rung was approximately the height of a man. So you have a ladder, but it's not an easy ladder to climb. It's almost like in order to go from one step to the other, you need to completely pull yourself up. And a distinguished woman, beautiful as the sun, approached the top of the ladder. Think about, I don't know, there's this image of this beautiful woman filled with light at the top of a ladder. And I thought in my heart that it was my mother. So Chaim Vital is having this vision, and he has a ladder, but at the top of the ladder, he sees a beautiful woman who he thinks is his mother. And she said, my son Chaim, why are you crying? I've heard your tears and have come to help you. She stretched out her right hand and raised me to the top of the ladder. Okay, so that's the first ladder in the dream. And then Elijah the prophet is there with him. He led me further into the center of the garden until I saw, he goes through something that looks like the Garden of Eden, until I saw a large and tall attic, as if it was on top of a great height, but there was no house under it. Imagine an attic without a house. So there's only a ladder leading to an attic. Its height above the garden was about a man's height. Its door was in the west, and there was a ladder of 3 stone steps from the ground to the door of the attic. I ascended the ladder alone and entered the door of the attic. And there, Reb Chaim Vital describes that in his dream, he saw God, blessed be he, sitting on a chair in the middle of the southern wall. He looked like the Ancient of Days, with a beard white as snow in infinite splendor. So Reb Chaim Vital, a bit differently, Jacob sees these angels coming up and down. Reb Chaim Vital, at this broken moment of his life where he doesn't know, is his spiritual work working? Is his personal life? It's a mess. He's with somebody, but he can't, something in his intimacy isn't working, and he doesn't know what to do. And in his dream, he sees his mother who calms him down. And he sees God who helps him and raises him up in this ladder, and this old man with a long beard. But it's interesting that Chaim Vital the mystic has a spiritual image also of the feminine aspect of God, what we call the Shekhinah, and also the masculine of God as this old man. And again, this is a dream, and they do say that dreams are 1/60th of a prophecy. But the dream is much longer than that. If anybody would like me to send them the whole dream, so write me an email and I'll send you the whole text, because It's quite a dream. And there's a good translation of his diary as well, if anybody wants to kind of get a closer look in some of these dreams. So we have all of these mystics. And the next story that I brought is, we're not going to read it, but it's from the Hasidic master, Reb Natan, who was a student of Reb Nachman. And I don't know if you heard of Reb Nachman of Breslov. Rabbi Nachman, who lived in, he died in 1812. He was the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And he was an amazing mystic. And he also recorded a lot of his dreams. And he told fantastic stories. And people said, where your stories come from? And he kind of said, these are my dreams that I'm sharing. And his stories had giants and princesses and pirates and all these wonderful things that we're not so used to hearing Hasidic masters tell. And Reb Nachman also wrote down his dreams. And in one of, this is actually not a dream that he had, but his greatest student, he tells a story that he was at a hard time in his life as well. And he had a dream that he kept on climbing up a ladder and falling, climbing up a ladder and falling. Finally, he gets to the top of the ladder and sees a man saying, never give up. And a year later, he meets his master and sees that the person he dreamt of was actually his master. And he says, I know you from my dream. Deja vu, the sense that my inner life has guided me to meet you, to meet a teacher. Okay. Let's move on to some psychoanalytic sources and do a little bit of that. And then we'll tie this up and see where this takes us. Dreams of stairs. There's a lot of wonderful dreams of stairs and of ladders. I can do a whole session just telling you dreams that I heard from my patients of climbing ladders and staircases. This is actually a dream that Jung writes in his biography called Dreams, Memories, Reflections. And he talks about, Carl Jung was the greatest student of Freud, but at some point they went their separate ways. They had very different ways of seeing things, and they didn't agree a lot. But in 1909, they're on their way to the United States together. They're on a boat. And on the boat, they took turns sharing their dreams with each other. So Jung shared his dreams with Freud, and then he said to Freud, now let's switch and you'll tell me your dreams. And Freud said, I'm not switching with you. I can't compromise my father figure, meaning you can tell me your dreams, I can be your analyst, but we can't, I'm not telling you mine. And that's when Jung understood that he doesn't have a colleague here. He has somebody who maybe sees himself as a bit different than the relationship he wanted to have. And this is the beginning of the split. This is the dream that he tells him, and it's a wonderful dream. And we'll read it and see also what we can do with this dream. I was in a house that I didn't know, which had two stories. This is, by the way, a recurring dream. I don't know how many of you have had a dream that you're in a house that you know it's your house, but you're suddenly exploring parts of it, or you find a part of it that you didn't know, or a back room, or an attic, or a basement. But this is something that I hear a lot. So I was in a house that I didn't know, which had two stories. It was my house. I found myself in the upper story where there was a kind of salon furnished with fine old pieces in Rococo style. On the walls hung a number of precious old paintings. I wondered that this should be my house and thought, not bad. But then it occurred to me that I didn't know what the lower floor looks like. Descending the stairs, I reached the ground floor. There, everything was much older, and I realized this part of the house must date from about the 15th or 16th century. The furnishing were medieval. The floors were of red brick. Everywhere it was rather dark. I went from one room to another thinking, now I really must explore the whole house. What does it mean that I live in a house, but I only know the top floor? And what does it mean in our dream that we start exploring, not just upward, but going down? I came upon a heavy door and opened it. Beyond it, I discovered layers of brick among the ordinary stone blocks and chips of brick in the mortar. As soon as I saw this, I knew that the walls dated from Roman times. My interest by now was intense. I looked more closely at the floor. It was of stone slabs, and one of those I discovered a ring. When I pulled it, the stone slab lifted, and again I saw a stairway of narrow stone steps leading down into the depths. These two, I descended and entered a low cave cut into the rock. Thick dust lay on the floor, and in the dust were scattered bones and broken pottery, like remains of a primitive culture. I discovered 2 broken skulls, obviously very old and half disintegrated, and then I awoke. First of all, what a wonderful dream. What an amazing dream Jung had. This dream of a home, he's discovering the home, he's going from floor to floor, going down, trying to discover what is this house that he has? What is around him? And the more he goes down each step, he's in a different, the 16th century, Roman time period until he's discovering these 2 skulls. I want to say that Jung always said that we can look at dreams and look at midrash, look at ancient, I would say, folk tales or myths, and kind of look at them side by side. I usually like learning this together with the midrash that you might know, a Jewish story about Abraham, who runs after a little calf, and the calf runs into a cave, and Abraham goes down the steps, and he discovers the cave where Adam and Eve are buried. And that's when he asked to be buried in the cave of the Machpelah. If you're familiar with this, we have a very similar imagery here of discovering a cave, going down and finding this, I would say, early ancestors, kind of connecting to where we came from, which also Jung and also Abraham is doing. That's not where Freud took it, though. Freud, when he heard this, what chiefly interested Freud in the dream were the 2 skulls. He returned to them repeatedly and urged me to find a wish in connection with them. What did I think about the skulls? What was your wish? Who were they? I knew perfectly well, of course, what he was driving at. That secret death wishes were concealed in the dream. Because if there's 2 skulls, it means you want somebody to be dead. And it means that you have some certain feelings that are repressed, that are hidden underneath a stone slab that I'm not coming in touch with. But does he really expect of me? I did not then trust, says Jung, my own judgment. And I wanted to hear Freud's opinion. I wanted to learn from him. So I submitted to his intention and I said, my wife and my sister-in-law, those are the 2 skulls. After all, I had to name someone whose death was worth the wishing. I was newly married, right? So again, we have newly married. We have Yaakov newly about to be married. We have Chaim Vital newly married as well. And at the time, I knew perfectly well that there was nothing within myself that pointed to such wishes. I did not feel up to quarreling with him. And I also feared that I might lose friendship if I insisted upon my own point of view. On the other hand, I wanted to know what he would make of my answer and what his reaction would be if I deceived him by saying something that suited his theories. So I told him a lie. In fact, Freud seemed greatly relieved by my reply. I saw from this that he was completely helpless in dealing with certain kind of dreams and had to take refuge in his doctrine. I realized that it was up to me to find out the real meaning of the dream. This is a historic moment on this boat to America that Freud and Jung part, because Jung says he can't help me because he sees this dream and sees it's something having to do with repressed wishes and with sexuality. This was written a year later by Freud, a year after that. And he writes here, and it might seem ridiculous to us, but he says, some time ago I learned that a psychologist who was unfamiliar with our work remarked to one of my friends that we were surely to overestimating the secret sexual significance of dreams. He stated that his most frequent dream was of climbing a flight of stairs, that there was surely nothing sexual behind this. Our attention having been called to this, we directed our investigation to the occurrence in dreams of flight and stairs, ladders and steps. And we soon ascertained that stairs or anything similar to them represents a definite symbol of coitus. The basis for this comparison is not difficult to find: rhythmical intervals, increasing breathlessness. So Freud says climbing up and down stairs is about sexuality. It's about Jacob trying to find his way, leaving his mother, not finding his wife. It's about, I don't think he looked at these dreams, but Chaim Vital, who's with his wife, but not able to find his right way. But Jung disagreed, and Jung said, with all due respect, this understanding, looking even at something like steps, like going up and down, as something having to do with sexuality, I disagree. And Jung took us to a different place, and Jung says, it is of course impossible. Wait, hang on one second, we lost it for a second. It is of course impossible to free oneself from one's childhood without devoting a great deal of work to it, as Freud's researches have long since shown. Nor can it be achieved through intellectual knowledge only. What is alone effective is remembering that is also re-experiencing. Jung says, remembering isn't enough. As many of you have been in therapy, we know it's not enough to just hold a mental image, to know something in your mind. What we need to do is to re-experience. And here Jung says something beautiful. He says, the steps and ladders theme point to the process of psychic transformation with all of its ups and downs. Psychic transformation, it takes me up, it takes me down. Sometimes I'm regressing, sometimes I'm moving forward. This personal unconscious must always be dealt with first. That is made conscious. Otherwise, the gateway to the collective unconscious cannot be opened. If you want to move back to the collective unconscious, to the place which is the most important place where dreams come from, which is that place that connects all of us, which is what Jung spoke about, that we all share a collective unconscious, that I can listen to somebody's dream and understand it through a mythology that possibly he's never heard because of this collective unconscious. But he says we cannot move to the collective unconscious before we deal with our personal unconscious. The journey with father and mother up and down many ladders represents the making conscious of infantile contents that have not yet been integrated. Moving up and down stairs has to do with things that we need to work through, things having to do with us being children, with our parents, with us being parents. All these things are the ups and downs of steps. I used to have a Jungian therapist who would sometimes yell at me and say, your personal father is not letting you see the archetypal father. He would say, you have to work through the personal, but in order to let go of the personal and to see that these symbols are also much greater. So sometimes we go down in order to go up. And when I look at Jacob's dream in that sense, what a beautiful thing. He's leaving his difficult home, his mother, his father. He doesn't know where he's going. He's on his way to possibly becoming a father himself, and he has to work through some of this. And we have angels going up and coming down. Part of him is going up, part is coming down, part is losing that faith that we have as our parents being these perfect figures that they are. And we have to work through some of those things in order to be able to touch on the archetypal meaning of some of our dreams. Okay. So here I brought the midrash of Abraham going into a cave. We're getting to the end here, and then we'll speak a little bit about dream because we need to also speak about what to do with this and have a bit of a time to reflect together. Mary Louise von Franz, who was a student of Jung and wrote a lot of his a lot of books and was one of his close students, and she says a very, very beautiful thing about Jacob's ladder. And here's what she says. She says, in all cases, the ladder symbolizes a continuous, constant connection with the divine powers of the unconscious. What is a ladder? We think a ladder is connecting heaven and earth. We think a ladder is connecting me to what's above, to the angels, to the sky, to heaven. Marie-Louise von Franz, based on Jungian therapy, says no. A ladder is building a bridge with the great beyond, but not the great beyond that's up here, but the great beyond that's in here. What is that ladder? The ladder is a connection with the divine powers of the unconscious. The unconscious is this infinite power within us, but usually we're disconnected from it. Usually I'm so busy doing, I'm so busy getting things, I'm so busy running away from here, going there. You know, a minute later, after this journey, Jacob is getting married, having kids, getting possessions, doing all the things that you need to do. But he had a moment of clarity that this ladder wasn't just a dream of the fact that he's connected. The dream in itself is a ladder. It connects us with the unknown depths of our psyche. Every dream is a rung on a ladder. And I love this because the dream itself is a ladder. The dream itself is a ladder. Every dream we listen to, every dream we write down in our dream journals, we're creating the possibility to go deeper into our psyche, to create a bridge that I can listen to what my unconscious is saying and the rich imagery that's coming up from beyond. And by doing that, I am staying in touch. And if we go back to Menachem Atzioni, that we asked this question, I mean, okay, music, we understand David's harp, we understand Abraham's people, we understand Isaac's food, but what is Jacob's ladder? Jacob's ladder is because the dream is a ladder. And by Jacob being a dreamer, he was able to connect to the divine powers of his soul, of his neshama, to be able to hear, even when disconnected, when he lost his way, all he needed to do is to touch again on that place within him and to allow that to guide him on his journey. Thomas Ogden, who's a psychoanalyst who lives in San Francisco, he says, psychoanalysis most fundamentally is a therapeutic enterprise with the goal of enhancing the patient's capacity to be alive. What do we do in psychotherapy? We want to help people be alive. What does it mean to be alive? As much as possible, the full spectrum of human, as much as possible of the full spectrum of a human, increasingly to be able to dream of one's experience. Ogden says, and I think I lost a word here somewhere because the sentence doesn't exactly make sense, but he says, what do we do in therapy? We help somebody be able to dream your experience. And that means to dream yourself into existence. To exist means to dream. Because when I live my life on the outside, if I stop dreaming, I'm not connected to that livelihood, which is the part which is godly inside of me, which is my divine nature. And to be cut off from that, what a price that is. And yes, life swallows us up. But every night we have an ability to stay in touch. But in order to do that, we have to listen. We have to listen. And this I said when I invited everybody to join, I'm sure you all heard, but Shira Ma'alot, which is also a song of steps, of ascension, of ladders, of bridges. And we say, B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion, when we will return to Zion, Hayinu kecholmim, it'll be as if we were dreaming. But I say that the way to return to our true nature, to return to Zion, to be where we're supposed to be. Zion isn't about Zionism. Zion is about being at home in the world. It's about knowing that I'm at the right place. How do I do that? Hayinu kecholmim. Psalms, King David is teaching us that the way to feel at home in our body, in the world, with our psyche, with our soul, is to build these bridges, is to build these ladders, is to dream. Is to dream. And by dreaming, we're enabling ourselves to be on a process of redemption. So in this class today, we went through quite a lot of different time periods. We did a little bit from the Bible, from Jacob. We were in the Heihalot, in the Zohar. We saw stories that took us to the story of Muhammad, and all the way till Chaim Vital in Sfat of the 16th century, and Reb Nachman and his student Reb Natan in the Hasidic tradition, each using this image of a ladder as a way of speaking of their connection, of what they needed at their times of need. And we saw how Freud would have seen some of these things in a very specific way, and how Jung, on the one hand, began his studying with Freud, with following in his footsteps, but then broke through to take us a bit deeper into understanding what a dream is, and that a dream in itself is this ladder. So I'm gonna stop sharing this now, and take a second here to see if everybody's still with me. I see a couple of other names. I see Lily and I see Tali Altman, and I see a lot of people that I'm really happy to see here. And I also want to say this is the first out of 6 classes that we're going to have. The classes will be available online. This is the one that whoever wants can join in on. And from the next one on, you need to sign up. But I'm hoping, and what I'm hoping to do now, I don't think we're going to do a dream circle, even though we do have a bit less people than I initially anticipated. But I want to say a couple of things about writing down your dreams, because by next week, what we're going to do is we're going to do about 50 minutes of a class, and then we're going to have a dream circle, which means that we're going to be sharing our dreams that are built around a certain theme. Now, it doesn't have to be the freshest dreams. It can be an old dream that you once had. But we'll be speaking about typical dreams, like dreams of being naked, or dreams of being swallowed up, or dreams of weddings, or dreams of flying, or dreams of ladders like we did today, and sharing some of them. We'll also have a WhatsApp group that will be able to share these things also between sessions. But let's take a second here and speak about as a practice, because we are at AJS, which is puts a strong emphasis on practicing. So how many people here, give me a raise of hands, do you write down your dreams? Good. I want to tell you that I've been writing my dreams for years, and there's times that I have more dreams, there's times that I have less. But every year on my birthday, I try to sit for at least an hour or two and read my dreams. And sometimes it's like I'm visiting a terrain of a different country. So I don't even remember that I walked through these places. And to remember these old dreams, these are such precious treasures of mine. Has anybody had dreams where you're climbing upstairs or going up a ladder? Okay. Good. So I see that Kim, for one, has one.
Do elevators count?
Yeah, yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Then yes.
I would say that elevators definitely count. How many people have had dreams with elevators or escalators? Yeah. It's interesting because people used to have dreams of horses, and now people have dreams of cars or of losing control of a car. As technology changes and as our experiences change, these archetypal dreams change as well. So Kim, if you're willing to and want, and I know that this is being recorded, so I'm saying, first of all, I'll say that when we move on to hearing dreams and working with them a little bit, that if you want, we can also pause the recording so it doesn't have to be part of the session. But I just want to maybe take 2 minutes, not that we have that much time, but I sent out something which is just a couple of ideas about, one second, about sharing, about writing down your dreams. And I sent this to you as well. So there's a bunch of stuff here. We're not going to read all of them now, but I'm inviting you all, especially if you're going to be continuing, but even if you're not continuing with us, it's quite easy. And I'm not saying it's easy because some people, it's pretty hard for them to remember their dreams. But it starts with buying yourself a nice dream journal. Splurge, buy yourself something beautiful, write your name in it, keep it next to your bed. And write, even if it's a fragment of a dream, even if it doesn't have a beginning or an end, be kind to your dreams, be respectful to them, and they will respect you back. And this, or your dream journal, if you're only starting to do some dream journaling, might end up being your most prized, precious possession. So I wrote down, I really just jotted down some things. I'm sure that as we go through this, some of these will change. We'll add some to it. But suddenly Daniel says, write down a couple, some words of advice, how to start doing this. And I didn't know exactly how many people are joining in and if we'll have time to have an actual dream circle. But I wrote certain things that work for me, which is writing my dreams down, I have a WhatsApp group with myself, which the way to do that is you start a group with somebody and then throw them out. And I have, so I can record it to myself. I speak to myself, even if I'm going in the middle of the night to the bathroom. Sometimes it's helpful to even just speak your dream, because the minute it leaves your mouth, it becomes a bit more real. This is my dream journal, one of those beautiful ones that looks like an old manuscript from Cambridge. And my kids have dream journals. At the age of 3, when we have an upsharon, which is like the ceremony of becoming, you know, cutting their hair and making them part of the tribe, each one of my children gets a dream journal. Now, they can't write it when they're 3, but they tell me their dreams and I write it down for them. So each of my kids has a dream journal. So I'm inviting you to look through this, and I hope some of it might be helpful. And this is mainly just about the process of trying to remember them, trying to stay when you wake up with the experience you had, and trying to notice detail and write it down as much as you can. And when you make a mistake and you're writing it down, don't erase your spelling mistakes, because they're important. These are the slips that help us hear something or know something about what else is happening. And we can do so much work with that. So I'm inviting you all to, and I wrote at the end, keep a chapter in your journal dedicated to dreams that other people have shared with you. Meaning 2 things. If you have a dream about someone, now you can't always do this. Sometimes dreams are embarrassing, and I wouldn't recommend calling somebody and saying, I had a dream that you died, see you later, have a nice day, right? Like, have a little bit of mercy on the people you share your dream life with. I always find myself very honored. If a patient dreams about me, I'm really honored that I appeared in their dream life. And if I have a dream of my patient, these have been turning points in my therapeutic practice. I'll share more about that as we work together. But if possible, I find it helpful to call somebody and say, I just want you to know I thought of you, I had a dream about you. Because our connection to them in the outer world might awaken something. Who knows if this dream is actually meant to go to them and not to me? And what will be awakened in my external connection with them might awaken something else. But also, when people share a dream that they had about me, at the end of my dream journal in the back, I would write it down. That I learned from Reb Chaim Vital, who wrote down these dreams as well. We have a couple of minutes. So again, I want to ask, I don't know if Kim or if somebody else would like to share a dream. I don't know if we have that much time to work. Usually we'll leave more time for the dream work. Would you like to share, Kim, a dream that you had about a ladder, or about somebody said something about an elevator? Or would we like to wait till next week and when we can actually start the dream circle and leave it a bit more time?
I don't mind to share if you like.
Okay, so please share a dream.
So just to say, when I knew this class was about ladders, I have my dream since the last few years in my telephone. So I called up all the dreams in which I mentioned ladder, and the word ladder came up about once a month in a dream.
Wow.
So this was a dream I had on the 8th of February, and it was in response to an incubation, a question I asked the Lord, what are my soul's stirrings? And I wrote, in the dream, I was in a large crowded place. There was a ladder. I needed to reach up to get my foot on the first rung because it was very high. Mia went first and got to the top and disappeared. I struggled to reach the first rung because spaces in between were so large and the ladder was hanging mid-air loosely, so it was wobbly. The first time I tried, there was nobody around. Then I had the dream a second time, and it was the same scene. There was nobody there at first, but as I tried to get my leg on the first rung, it was really hard because the spaces in between. I noticed I was actually in a kind of a dining room. People were sitting at tables around me. Someone got up to help me get my foot on the first rung. It was so high. I was swinging, and at some point it seemed to tilt backwards, then straightened up. I kept going. People pointed to another normal ladder going up at the back of the dining room hall, facing me. People were going up that way, that ladder. It was sturdier, easier, lower, and this one was on the floor. But I kept going on the one that was swinging midair. I was the only one on this ladder. When I got to the top, there was a big white sign with the word light on it. It seemed loose, so I took off the sign and held up the light in my hands. People at the bottom of the ladder stared up, watching me. And I put the sign back. I'd reached the light.
Wow. Wow.
So
It's
that was
amazing. It's a wonderful dream. That image of you almost on a ladder with a big sign that says light. And it reminds me a bit of Reb Chaim Vital's dream, where he also describes how difficult it is sometimes to go from rung to rung. A ladder isn't always an easy thing. And sometimes the space between is the hardest part of our journey. Because to step on a ladder, you're holding on to something, but then you let go, and there's a lot of space. Hachalala panui, the nothingness between one step. We haven't gotten the next step yet, and there's just a lot of space. We're swinging between heaven and earth, holding on to nothing. And sometimes letting go, even before you took the next step, is a really scary thing to do. But it seems like your dream there is telling you also about your ability to make these steps in your journey, to get some help from people around you. There's a lot of really beautiful images that seems to me. How did you feel when you woke up from this dream, Kim?
So I called it reaching for the light. And I remember I wrote down, dreams are more like an experience than dreams, like reaching or trying to reach a place. There's contact. Am I asking the right questions? There's a lot of satisfaction. Sow and grow.
Wow.
So it was obviously a dream where I felt really satisfied when I woke up.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Sometimes those dreams can give us a lot, exactly what we need in order to keep on going and to live in that space between when we don't have something to hold on to.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I tend not to interpret immediately, because unless something is really sharp, I tend to leave things for a while, because I've noticed that some dreams have new chapters every time. I know that it's a continuation of an old dream, and they carry on for years with different interpretations. So I hadn't actually this is the first time I looked at this dream since I had it in February.
Yeah. So I completely agree. And a lot of the work we do sometimes is not interpreting dreams, but listening to them and letting them echo. The dream does its work, even if we don't understand it. We're going to end for today. I'm inviting everybody. If you've signed up, then we will send something out to everybody, and we will start a WhatsApp group, and we'll be able to share a bit more dreams with each other during this week to see what happens and what comes up. And next week, we'll be speaking about clothing and about dressing and undressing. So if you have dreams of either being clothed or of costumes or of being naked, those dreams of standing and suddenly finding that you are not wearing clothing, these are important dreams, and we're gonna look at them and see who else had dreams that are similar to that. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I look forward to meeting all of you a bit more, and I hope you enjoyed our time together. Goodbye, shalom.